My name is Isla, and I'm 34 years old. I changed everything about myself, my hair, my name, even the way I spoke, because I refused to live as the woman everyone hated. For 3 years, I built a quiet new life, and for the first time, I felt invisible. But one photograph, one innocent picture taken at work, exposed me to the world again. Within days, my face was everywhere, and the man I thought I'd killed came back to find me. Or at least, that's who I am now. The name on my driver's license, my apartment lease, and the tiny brass tag on my art gallery key all say Isla Morgan. But that wasn't always my name. Once upon a time, I was someone else, someone I've spent years trying to erase. I live in a small coastal town in Oregon now, tucked between the gray ocean cliffs and the whispering pines. The air always smells like rain and salt, and the people here are quiet in that way only small towns can be. Polite smiles, distant eyes, and a lot of curiosity masked as friendliness. I rent a modest apartment above an old bookstore, and I work down the street at Seabrook Gallery, a place that smells of varnish and sea breeze. Every morning, I unlock the front door, sweep the sand the wind sneaks in overnight, and tell myself that this life, this quiet, ordinary life, is all I've ever wanted. I make coffee, water the succulents by the window, and talk to tourists about landscapes painted in watercolors and the fragile beauty of glass art. No one here knows anything about me beyond the basics. They don't need to. But sometimes, in the reflection of the gallery window, I catch a glimpse of who I used to be. The shadow of the woman I buried 3 years ago. That night still haunts me. The night I left my old life behind. The sky was tearing itself apart with rain, and lightning flashed across the windshield as I drove, my heart pounding so hard it drowned out the sound of the storm. I remember gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went white, every mile between me and that town feeling like a stolen breath. I didn't pack much, just a duffel bag, a stack of cash, and a photograph I couldn't bear to leave behind. I didn't sleep for 2 days after that. When I finally stopped at a roadside motel, I sat in front of the mirror and didn't recognize the woman staring back. That was when I made the choice. If I was going to survive, I had to disappear. I dyed my hair from deep auburn to platinum blonde, chopping it unevenly at first, before I found someone willing to fix it. No questions asked. I lost weight without trying. Fear will do that to you. I trained my voice to sound different, softened my old accent, even practiced a new signature until it felt natural. A friend of a friend, someone who owed me a favor, helped me with new identification papers. And just like that, Leah Kinsley ceased to exist. Yes, that was my real name once. Leah. The name that used to appear in news articles, on police, as reports whispered in gossip-filled living rooms. The name tied to a mistake so heavy I thought it would crush me. In Seabrook, no one calls me Leah. No one looks at me twice. I'm the woman who paints in her spare time, who volunteers at the summer art fair, who keeps to herself. Safe, invisible. But living under a false name isn't as freeing as you'd think. It's like wearing a mask made of glass. You look real, but one wrong move, and everything shatters. I avoid cameras, even the harmless ones. When someone pulls out their phone to take a selfie at the gallery, I step out of frame. I have no social media, no photos online. If anyone asks why, I joke that I'm old-fashioned. The truth is simpler. I'm hiding. Still, after 3 years of silence, the edges of my paranoia began to dull. I started to believe I'd done it, that I'd finally outrun my past. Until he walked in. It was a rainy afternoon, the kind that makes the sea and sky blend into one endless gray. The gallery was empty except for the hum of the heater when the doorbell jingled, and a man stepped inside. He looked like he belonged to the storm. Wet curls, dark jacket, a camera slung around his neck. "Beautiful place," he said, flashing a smile that seemed effortless. "Mind if I look around?" "Of course," I said, returning his smile, pretending not to notice the camera. He introduced himself as Evan, a freelance photographer doing a feature on small-town artists for a regional magazine. He had that kind of warmth that made people open up, but something about him made me cautious. Maybe it was the way his eyes lingered, too observant, too curious. He walked through the gallery, snapping photos of paintings, sculptures, and the ocean view from the big front window. Then he turned the lens toward me. Would you mind if I got a quick shot of the owner? You'd fit the tone perfectly. Authentic, approachable, he said. Oh, I'm not the owner, I replied quickly. Just the manager, and I really don't like photos. He laughed lightly. Everyone says that until they see themselves in good lighting. I shook my head, firm but polite. Maybe another time. He didn't push it, just smiled and went back to photographing the artwork. But at one point, while I was helping a customer, I noticed the soft click of his. I looked up and he was smiling at me from across the room. I wasn't posing, I said. You didn't have to, he replied. That was the point. I brushed it off, but something about it unsettled me. After he left, the gallery felt emptier than usual, and I couldn't shake the feeling that a line had been crossed. A week passed, and life slipped back into routine. Until one morning, I stopped by the cafe next door for my usual coffee and noticed a stack of regional magazines by the counter. There it was, Seabrook Arts, The Hidden Gems of the Coast. My stomach dropped. On the cover was a photo of the gallery, sunlight streaming through the windows. And inside, on page 5, was the photograph Evan had taken, the candid one. I was laughing, hair falling over my shoulder, eyes bright, looking like a woman who had nothing to hide. For a moment, I felt proud. Then I saw it. Under the online version of the article, buried in the comments section, someone had written 5 words that turned my blood to ice. I know that face. That one comment, those 5 words, would unravel everything I'd worked so hard to bury. One sentence, 5 words, sent my entire world spiraling. I know that face. I remember the way my fingers froze over the keyboard as I stared at those words on the glowing screen. The cafe had gone silent around me, though I knew it hadn't. People were talking, spoons clinking against mugs, the hum of a low radio filling the air. But to me, it all blurred into white noise. My heart started to hammer so loudly I could barely hear myself breathe. I told myself it couldn't mean anything. People online say strange things all the time. Maybe it was just a coincidence. Maybe they thought I resembled someone else. But the way the words were written, so certain, so deliberate, made my stomach twist. I scrolled back to the article, zooming in on my face. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe the hair, the lighting, the angle. But the truth hit me harder with every second I looked. No matter how I'd changed my hair or softened my voice, my eyes were the same. You can't change your eyes. I clicked on the commenter's profile. The username was Raven Still Lives. Nothing about it stood out, no picture, no bio, just a blank account. But there was something oddly familiar about it, like a half-remembered song from another life. My palms started to sweat as I tried to place it. I knew I'd seen that name before. Somewhere that mattered, somewhere dangerous. I closed the laptop, shoved it into my bag, and hurried out of the cafe. The wind off the coast hit me hard, but I barely felt it. All I could think was someone knows. That night, I sat in my apartment, staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself it was all in my head. I told myself what I always do when fear creeps in, that the past is dead, that Leah is gone. But no matter how many times I whispered it, I didn't believe it. For the next few days, I tried to move on. I worked at the gallery, chatted politely with customers, and forced a smile whenever someone mentioned the magazine feature. But every evening when I came home, I opened my laptop and refreshed that same article, over and over. The comment was still there, unchanged, untouched, waiting. And every time I looked at it, I felt that strange pull toward the username. Raven Still Lives. The longer I stared, the more I remembered. A flash of an old classroom, a teacher's lounge, a locked drawer, and a man's voice, low, confident, and full of poison. That's when the memories began to flood back. Before I became Isla, I was Leah Kinsley, a small-town English teacher in the kind of community where everyone knows everyone, and secrets never stay buried. I loved my job, my students, my quiet little house on Elm Street. My life was ordinary, and I thought that was a good thing. Until Simon Reeves came along. He was charming in that way older men sometimes are, confident, intelligent, with just enough sadness in his eyes to make you want to fix him. He was the history teacher at the same school, 10 years older than me, and married. I told myself that part didn't matter, at least not at first. He told me his marriage was over, that his wife didn't understand him, that I made him feel alive again. I believed him. For a while, it felt like something out of a novel. Secret texts, whispered meetings after class, nights spent in cheap motels 2 towns over. I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't stop. I thought what we had was love. But love doesn't leave bruises. Love doesn't twist your words until you forget who you were before. When Simon's wife Mara found out, she didn't scream or cry, at least not in front of me. She simply looked at me once, and in that look I saw everything. Fury, humiliation, hatred, and fear. Because Simon wasn't who I thought he was. Things changed after that. He started drinking more, started calling me in the middle of the night, demanding to know where I was, who I was with. I tried to end it, but he wouldn't let go. He said if I left him, he'd ruin me. And in a small town like ours, that wasn't an empty threat. Then came that night. The night that changed everything. It was raining, same as the night I left for good. Simon came to my house, shouting through the door. I told him to leave. He didn't. The argument turned into a fight. Words, accusations, broken glass. He grabbed my wrist so tightly it left a mark for days. I pushed him hard. He fell. His head hit the corner of the coffee table. He didn't move. The silence that followed was the loudest sound I've ever heard. I called for help, but by the time they arrived, it was too late. They ruled it an accident, self-defense even, but that didn't matter. The town didn't care about the truth. All they saw was the teacher who killed her lover. The whispers started. The looks. Parents pulled their kids from my class. People crossed the street to avoid me. Mara showed up at my door once just to tell me I'd ruined both their lives. And maybe she was right. So I ran. I became Isla Morgan, a ghost with a new name. And for 3 years, it worked. Until now. Until those 5 words pulled Leah Kinsley back from the grave. I scrolled to the bottom of the article again, my pulse quickening. There it was, that same name. Raven still lives. I opened the profile once more, desperate for any clue. No posts, no friends, no pictures. But one detail sent a chill through me. The account had been created only 2 weeks ago. Around the same time the magazine went to print. Whoever it was, they'd been waiting, watching. I slammed the laptop shut again and pressed my palms to my eyes. Maybe it was Mara. Maybe it was someone from the old school. Maybe it was just some stranger with bad intentions. But deep down, I knew it wasn't random. It never is. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat by the window, watching the rain streak down the glass, listening to the ocean crash against the rocks. Every shadow looked like someone standing outside. Every sound made me flinch. By the next morning, I was exhausted, physically, emotionally, completely. But curiosity won over fear. I logged back in, telling myself it was only to make sure the comment hadn't spread, that no one else had joined in. It hadn't. But something else had changed. A new message notification blinked at the top of my screen. I hesitated before clicking it, my finger hovering over the touchpad. My stomach tightened as the message opened. "You can't hide from what you did, Leah." I froze, my throat went dry. It wasn't just a comment anymore, it was personal. They knew my real name. For the first time in 3 years, I realized I wasn't hiding anymore. I was being hunted. The same user had found me, and they weren't finished yet. No one was supposed to know that name ever again. After that message, my entire body went cold. It felt like my past had crawled out of its grave, dripping with everything I'd tried to bury. For a long moment, I just sat there, staring at the words on the screen. You can't hide from what you did, Leah. Leah. Hearing or reading that name again felt like a slap. My name hadn't been Leah for 3 years. Isla was who I'd become, who I had to become. But that one message shattered the illusion. Someone knew the truth. I panicked. The first thing I did was delete everything. Every account, every trace of myself online. I erased the gallery's website link from my social media bio, deleted the email I'd been using since I moved here, and even threw my laptop into the closet as if shutting it away could make the threat disappear. Then I called the gallery and told my boss, Maren, that I was sick. My voice trembled, and she told me to take as much time as I needed. If only she knew. I didn't step outside that day, or the next. I pulled the curtains shut and barely ate. Every sound made me jump. A car passing, a floorboard creaking. I didn't sleep much, and when I did, I dreamed of Simon, his face pale and still, the sound of glass shattering, the echo of his voice calling my name in the dark. By the fourth day, I started convincing myself it was over. Maybe whoever sent that message got bored. Maybe they'd made their point. Maybe it was just some twisted prank. Then the package arrived. It was early morning, gray light just beginning to spill across the harbor when I opened the gallery. The mail always came around 10, but that day it was waiting for me on the doorstep. A plain brown envelope, my name handwritten in black ink. Not Isla Morgan. It said, "To Leah." My hands shook as I picked it up. I looked around, but the street was empty except for the gulls fighting over scraps near the dumpster. The envelope wasn't postmarked. Whoever sent it had left it there in person. Inside, wrapped in thin tissue paper, was a printed photograph. The photograph. The same one Evan had taken. The candid shot of me, laughing inside the gallery. But on the back, written in the same black ink, were 4 words. "We need to talk." I felt my knees weaken. My first thought was Mara, Simon's wife. Maybe she'd found me. Maybe she wanted answers, or revenge. I'd seen what hatred looked like in her eyes before. If she'd spent 3 years hunting me, I couldn't blame her. I tucked the envelope under my coat and locked the gallery doors. I couldn't concentrate that day. Every time the bell above the door rang, I flinched. Every customer who lingered too long near the counter made my stomach twist. I could almost feel eyes on me through the front window, though no one was there. By the time I got home that evening, my chest felt tight. I made tea just to have something to do with my hands. I wanted to call someone, anyone, but who could I tell? Marin? The police? What would I say? "Hi. Someone from my old life knows I'm living under a fake identity because they saw a magazine photo? No one would believe me, and even if they did, it would all come out. My old name, my record, the story. Everything I'd built here would vanish. So I kept quiet. That night, as I sat alone in the dark, I remembered the night Simon died. He'd shown up at my house unannounced, pounding on the door until the frame rattled. It was late, close to midnight, and the rain outside was relentless. I tried not to answer, but his voice carried through the glass. "You can't ignore me forever, Leah." When I opened the door, he was soaked, furious, reeking of whiskey. His words were sharp, slurred, venomous. He accused me of betraying him, of ruining his life. I told him to leave, but he stepped inside anyway. He grabbed my wrist when I tried to push him out. I can still feel the bruises his fingers left, the burn of his grip. I remember shoving him away, hard. The sound of him hitting the coffee table. The awful, still silence that followed. For years I told myself it was an accident, that I didn't mean to hurt him. But sometimes, when the guilt gets too loud, I wonder if there was a part of me, some dark, desperate part, that wanted him to fall. Now that guilt was back, heavier than ever. Whoever sent the message knew exactly where to strike. Over the next few days, my paranoia grew. When I looked out my window, I noticed a black sedan parked across the street. At first, I didn't think much of it. Tourists passed through all the time, but it never moved. Morning, evening. Even at night, the car sat there, engine off like a shadow that refused to leave. I started to change my routine. Different routes to the grocery store, different coffee shops. But it didn't matter. No matter where I went, I felt the same prickle at the back of my neck, the sense that someone was always just out of sight, watching. Then came the final push. It was a Sunday morning, quiet and cold. I opened my apartment door to find a single folded piece of paper lying on the mat. No envelope this time. Just a note, handwritten in that same black ink. "If you don't meet me, everyone will." That was it. No name, no location, just the threat. My hands trembled as I read it again and again until the words blurred together. I didn't know who everyone was supposed to mean. My coworkers, the people in town, the police, the press. It didn't matter. Whoever this was, they were in control. I sat down at my kitchen table, staring at the note beside my untouched coffee. I thought about running again. Packing my bag, disappearing one more time, becoming someone new in another town. But something inside me broke. I was tired of running. If they wanted to meet, fine, I'd face them. I needed to know who had been haunting me all this time. Mara, a stranger, or maybe someone worse. I sent an email to the gallery saying I'd be away for a few days. I turned off my phone, took the note, and left the apartment without telling anyone where I was going. The whole way to the meeting spot, the place the sender would later reveal. I told myself I was ready. But deep down, I knew the truth. I wasn't walking toward answers. I was walking straight into a trap. Whoever wanted to talk wasn't after forgiveness. They wanted something else, something far more dangerous. When I saw who was waiting for me, I nearly collapsed. The cafe was almost empty that morning, a place called the Mariner's Cup, perched at the edge of town where the coast curved away from the main road. It was quiet, the kind of place where no one asked questions, where conversations died under the hum of an old espresso machine. I chose it because it felt safe, neutral. I'd left early, arriving 15 minutes before the meeting time, but whoever had called me there was already waiting. At first I thought I was seeing a ghost. She sat in the corner booth, back straight, hands wrapped around a cup of coffee gone cold. Her hair was darker now, her posture stiff, but her face was unforgettable. "Amber," I whispered, my voice barely audible. My little sister looked up. For a second I saw something flicker across her face. Shock, relief, anger, I couldn't tell which, but it vanished just as quickly. "Hi, Leah," she said. Not Isla, Leah. The name landed like a stone in my stomach. I stood frozen at the entrance, my body torn between running and collapsing right there. She motioned for me to sit, and I obeyed, my legs moving on autopilot. The air between us was heavy, thick with years of silence and words we'd both avoided. "I don't understand," I managed finally. How did you find me?" She leaned back, studying me like a puzzle she'd almost solved. "The photograph, the one in that magazine. I knew those eyes the second I saw them. You can change your hair, your name, your whole life, Leah, but you can't change your eyes." Her tone wasn't cruel, but it wasn't gentle either. It was sharp, tired, full of restrained fury. I pressed my hands together, trying to keep them from shaking. "You shouldn't have come here." "Shouldn't I?" she said. "You vanished for 3 years without a word, and I'm supposed to just pretend you never existed? Mom cried herself to sleep every night. She thought you were dead." The words cut deep. I looked down at the table, unable to meet her eyes. "I didn't mean to hurt her. Or you. But I had no choice, Amber. You don't understand what it was like." She laughed bitterly. "No, you're right. I don't understand what it's like to disappear after." She stopped herself, catching the attention of the barista before lowering her voice. "After everything that happened with Simon." My throat tightened. "Don't say his name." "Why not? You think changing your hair color makes it go away? That you can just pretend none of it happened?" I stared at her, the edges of my vision blurring. She looked so different now. Older, harder. There was a faint scar along her jawline I didn't remember, and her hands trembled when she spoke, though she tried to hide it. The sister I once knew, the one who used to braid my hair and sneak cookies from the kitchen, was gone. "I didn't run to escape blame," I said softly. "I ran because I couldn't survive there anymore. Every time I walked down the street, people stared. They whispered. They treated me like I was a monster." "Maybe because you never told anyone what really happened," Amber snapped. "You let the story twist until no one knew what to believe." "What difference would it have made?" I said, my voice shaking. "Simon was dead. The town wanted someone to hate, and I was right there." For a moment, we both sat in silence. The sound of the coffee grinder filled the space between us. Amber's expression softened just a little. "So tell me now. Tell me the truth." "I came here for answers, Leah. Not revenge." I closed my eyes, forcing the words out. "It wasn't supposed to happen that way. He came to my house that night, drunk, screaming. I told him to leave, but he wouldn't. He grabbed me. I pushed him. He fell. It was an accident. I swear to you, Amber, it was an accident." When I opened my eyes again, she was watching me closely. "And you didn't call me. You didn't call anyone. You just vanished." "I couldn't face you," I said. "Or Mom. You both deserved better than the mess I made." She exhaled slowly, running a hand through her hair. "You think disappearing made it better? You think changing your name erased the pain you left behind?" I bit down on the inside of my cheek, trying to keep my emotions contained. No, I whispered. It made it worse. Every day I think about you, about Mom, about that night. I just wanted to forget for a while. Amber's eyes glistened, but her voice stayed firm. Well, forgetting doesn't work. It never does. I wanted to reach for her hand, but I didn't. There was too much distance between us now. Too many years of unanswered questions. Is Mom okay? Amber hesitated before answering. She's sick. Has been for a while. She keeps asking if I've heard from you. I never know what to tell her. Guilt flooded through me, cold and heavy. I'm sorry, I murmured. If I could go back. You can't, she interrupted. None of us can. Silence fell again. I thought maybe this was it, that she'd come here just to make me feel the weight of what I'd done. But then her expression changed. Her anger dimmed, replaced by something else. Fear. Leah, she said quietly, leaning in. I didn't come just to find you. I frowned. What do you mean? I came because someone else is looking for you too. The words hit me like ice water. Who? I asked, my pulse quickening. Amber hesitated, biting her lip before reaching into her bag. I don't know who they are exactly, but they've been following me, asking questions about you. They knew things they shouldn't. I felt my stomach twist. How long? A few weeks, she said. Ever since that magazine photo came out. The mention of it made me shiver. What did they want? They said they needed to find you, that you owed them something. They never gave a name, but... She trailed off, pulling something from her bag. It was another photograph. She slid it across the table, face down. I didn't want to touch it, but I had to. My fingers trembled as I turned it over. It was me, standing by my apartment window, the curtains half open. The image had been taken at night, 2 days ago, from across the street. I stared at it, my breath catching in my throat. Where did you get this? Amber's voice was barely above a whisper. They sent it to me, with a note that said, if you care about your sister, tell her we're not finished yet. The room started to spin. I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself. Amber, I said slowly, whoever this is, they know where I live. She nodded, her expression grave. I know. That's why I came. For the first time since she'd arrived, I saw tears in her eyes. Leah, I think you're in danger. And then I realized the truth. Whatever game I'd been pulled into, it wasn't just about my past anymore. It was about what was coming next. Amber's warning wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something far darker. The photo proved it. I wasn't just being watched. I was being hunted. I thought I was paranoid until I saw the proof. After meeting Amber, I brought the photograph home, though part of me wished I'd burned it the moment she handed it to me. I sat at my kitchen table with the blinds drawn tight, the only light coming from the weak glow of a lamp. The picture lay between us, a single glossy square that felt heavier than it should have. It was my apartment, my window, my silhouette framed by pale curtains. The angle of the shot suggested it had been taken from across the street, close enough that the photographer could see me, but far enough that I wouldn't have noticed. I told you, Leah, Amber said, her voice tense. You can't stay here. I rubbed my temples, exhaustion settling deep into my bones. And go where? I've spent years running. I can't do it again. Not because of some photograph. She stared at me in disbelief. You don't understand. Someone's following you. They know where you live, where you work, everything. I'm aware, I said quietly, forcing my voice not to shake. But running didn't fix anything before. It just bought me time. I'm done hiding. Amber wanted to argue. I could see it in her eyes, but instead she just sighed. Then we have to find out who's doing this. Together, we began piecing through what little we knew. Someone had taken my picture 2 nights ago. Someone who had also found Amber and sent her that same photo. Whoever it was, they wanted me scared. But why? Revenge? Justice? Or something worse? My mind kept circling back to the gallery, to Evan, the photographer. I remembered his easy smile, the way his camera had clicked when I wasn't looking. There was something about him that felt off now, something that hadn't registered until this moment. There was this man, I told Amber slowly. He came to the gallery a few weeks ago. Said he was a photographer doing a magazine feature. He's the one who took the original picture that started all of this. Amber's eyebrows drew together. You think it's him? I don't know. But after he left, I couldn't shake the feeling he knew more than he let on. She tapped the photo nervously. Then maybe we should confront him. No, I said immediately. If it's him, cornering him could make things worse, and if it's not, we'll just look crazy. Amber looked unconvinced but didn't argue further. We stayed up late, combing through the article online, searching his name, Evan Rhodes, but the more we looked, the less we found. No personal website, no social media, no other credits in the magazine. It was as if he didn't exist before that story. When Amber finally went to bed on the couch, I sat by the window, unable to stop staring into the darkness outside. The streetlights flickered faintly in the fog. Everything was quiet except for the occasional crash of waves in the distance. And then I heard it. Footsteps. Soft, slow, deliberate. My breath caught in my throat. I turned off the lamp and crept toward the window, careful not to make a sound. The blinds were drawn, but I lifted one corner just enough to see through. Someone was standing across the street. A man, still as a statue. A hood covered his head, hiding his face. For a long, terrifying moment, he didn't move. He just stood there, watching. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands and called the police. My voice was barely a whisper as I explained what was happening. They said they'd send someone right away, but by the time the cruiser's lights flashed down the street, the figure was gone. No footprints, no sound, just the lingering chill of being watched. The officers took my statement politely, but I could see the doubt in their eyes. Probably just a drunk or a prank, one said. Happens all the time near the coast. When they left, I locked every window, double-bolted the door, and sat awake until sunrise, too afraid to close my eyes. Amber found me like that in the morning, tired, jumpy, still clutching my phone. You look like you haven't slept, she said softly. I didn't. I walked to the front door, intending to grab the morning paper, but stopped cold. The door was slightly ajar. I locked it, I whispered. Amber frowned. Maybe you forgot. I didn't. We exchanged a glance before I pushed the door open. The hinges creaked, and the cold morning air spilled inside. My pulse thundered as I scanned the small entryway. Nothing looked stolen or out of place, except one thing. The framed magazine photograph that had hung on my wall was gone. In its place, taped neatly to the bare wall, was another note. The same neat handwriting, the same black ink. You can't erase who you are. My breath hitched. My skin felt like ice. Amber's face went pale as she read over my shoulder. They were inside, she whispered. I nodded slowly, my body trembling. They were here while we were sleeping. That was the breaking point. I wanted to scream, to tear the walls down until I found whoever had been haunting me. Instead, I felt numb. Completely, terrifyingly numb. Amber grabbed her phone, ready to call the police again, but I stopped her. No, I said. They won't believe us. Not until something worse happens. We need proof. Proof? She repeated. Leah, this is proof. I looked at the note, the missing photo, the open door. Not enough. Whoever this is, they're playing a game, and if we don't figure out the rules, we're already losing. Amber looked at me like she barely recognized me. Maybe she didn't. I barely recognized myself anymore either. The rest of that day passed in a fog. We stayed inside, curtains drawn, waiting for something, anything to happen. My nerves were stretched so thin that every sound made me jump. I tried to eat but couldn't swallow more than a few bites. By late afternoon, Amber insisted on staying the night again, just to make sure I wasn't alone. I wanted to argue, but truthfully, I was grateful. Being alone in that apartment after what happened felt impossible. We were just settling in when my phone rang. The sound cut through the silence like a scream. Amber glanced at the screen. Blocked number. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the answer button. It's them, I whispered. Don't, she warned. Let it go to voicemail. But something in me, some mix of dread and defiance, made me press accept. I lifted the phone to my ear. Who is this? For a few seconds there was only static. Then a man's voice, low and deliberate, came through. Leah, he whispered. It's time to tell the truth. The line went dead. I stood frozen, phone still pressed to my ear, the echo of his voice lingering in my mind like a curse. Amber's face went white. "Who was it?" she asked. But I already knew. I'd recognize that voice anywhere. It was Simon. The man I thought was dead, the man whose death had destroyed my life, was alive, and he'd just called me. His voice, one I thought I'd never hear again. For a moment after the call, I couldn't move. It was as if my whole body had turned to ice, my heart a solid weight in my chest. The air in the room felt thinner, sharper, harder to breathe. I could still hear the echo of that voice, soft, measured, unmistakable. "Leah, it's time to tell the truth." It couldn't be him. It couldn't. Simon Reeves was dead. I had seen him fall. I had heard the crack of glass and bone, seen his body go still on the living room floor, his eyes glassy and empty. I had watched the paramedics cover him with that white sheet. I remembered the weight of it, how final it had felt. And yet, that voice. Amber was staring at me, panic flickering in her eyes. "Leah, what did he say?" I swallowed hard. It was him. "Who?" "Simon." Her face drained of color. "That's not possible. He's—" "I know." My voice came out as a whisper, but it was his voice, Amber. I swear it. We stood in silence, the only sound the faint hum of the refrigerator. I could see my reflection in the dark window. Pale, hollow, trembling. For the first time, I wasn't sure what was real anymore. Amber shook her head. "Someone's messing with you. They found out about your past somehow, and now they're using it against you." I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her. But the longer I replayed the call in my mind, the harder it was to convince myself it was a trick. The way he'd said my name, the precise tone, the way he drew out the L just a fraction too long. Simon had always spoken like that. Controlled, calm, dangerous. "He's dead," I said finally, almost to convince myself. "I saw it happen." "Then we can prove it," Amber said. "If he really died, there has to be a record, news coverage, an obituary, something." She pulled out her laptop and began typing furiously. I sat beside her, every muscle in my body tight. The glow from the screen painted her face in cold blue light as she scrolled through page after page. But there was nothing. No obituary, no article, no police report. Just one thing. A missing persons notice, dated 3 years ago. Simon Reeves, 42, last seen leaving his home after a domestic dispute. Presumed missing. Presumed missing. I leaned back in my chair, my mind spinning. "No," I said softly. "That can't be right. The police came. They said he was dead. I remember the coroner." "Leah," Amber's voice was shaking. "There's nothing here, nothing official. It's like they never confirmed it." I couldn't speak. I could barely think. Memories flooded back. The fall, the blood, the ambulance lights flickering through the rain. But maybe I had assumed. Maybe in all that chaos I hadn't actually seen his body taken away. Maybe he'd woken up after I ran. My stomach twisted. What if he'd lived? I pushed away from the table and paced the room, my mind clawing for something solid to hold on to. He's been watching me, all this time. He took the photos, sent the notes. It's him. It has to be. Amber's eyes were wide with disbelief. "But why? Why wait all these years?" "Because he wants me to suffer," I said. He always wanted control. He used to say that as long as I remembered him, he'd never really die. Amber closed the laptop and grabbed my hands. "Leah, listen to me. We need to go to the police." I shook my head violently. "And say what? That a man who was supposed to be dead called me on the phone? That he's been watching me? They'll think I've lost my mind." The truth was, maybe I already had. That night, I couldn't sit still. Every creak in the floorboards made me flinch. Every gust of wind against the window felt like someone whispering outside. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. At dawn, my phone rang again. The same block number. I hesitated, my hand trembling as I reached for it. Amber stirred on the couch, half awake. "Don't," she said groggily, but I answered. This time there was no static, just breathing. Slow, confident. "Simon?" I said. "You sound scared," the voice replied, that same low tone that once used to make me feel safe. "I told you, Leah, you can't hide forever." Where are you? I demanded. What do you want? He chuckled softly. You took my life from me, my career, my reputation, everything. Now it's your turn to lose something. You're lying, I snapped, my voice trembling. You're dead. Then come see for yourself. The line went quiet for a beat, and then he spoke again, his words slow and deliberate. The old pier, tonight, midnight. Before I could answer, the call disconnected. Amber sat up, eyes wide. What did he say? I told her. She shook her head. You're not going. I have to, I said. If it's really him, I need to know. If it's not, I need to stop whoever's doing this before it destroys both of us. She grabbed my arm. Leah, this is insane. What if it's a trap? It is a trap, I said, my voice steady despite the fear clawing at me. But I'm done running from ghosts. I need to see the truth with my own eyes. That night, I drove to the pier alone. The sky was a heavy sheet of gray, the moon hidden behind clouds. The ocean was wild, the waves crashing violently against the rocks below. The wooden boards creaked under my feet as I walked to the end, the fog swallowing everything beyond a few feet. I waited. The sound of the wind filled my ears. My breath came out in visible puffs, each one trembling. Then, through the fog, I heard footsteps. Slow, deliberate, the same rhythm as that night years ago, when he had cornered me in my living room. A shape emerged, a tall figure wearing a long, dark coat. As he stepped closer, the mist shifted enough for me to see his face, the scar on his cheek, the same one from the night he fell. It was him, Simon, alive. I staggered backward, the world tilting. No, I whispered. You're dead. I saw... He smiled, cold and deliberate, his eyes gleaming with something cruel. I told you, he said softly, taking another step closer. You stole my life, Leah. He paused, his voice dropping to a chilling whisper. Now I'm taking yours. The fog closed in around us, and in that moment I realized Simon's death wasn't my salvation. It was the beginning of my reckoning. The past didn't die. It waited. The fog around the pier was thick enough to taste, heavy with salt and the faint metallic tang of rain. My heart hammered against my ribs as Simon stepped closer, his silhouette growing clearer with every second. I could hardly believe what I was seeing, but the scar on his cheek, the one I'd caused, was proof enough. He was real, alive, and standing right in front of me. Simon! The word slipped out of me before I could stop it. My voice broke halfway through his name. How are you here? He tilted his head, a cruel smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. You really thought I'd die that easily? I saw you fall, I whispered. I saw you hit the table. He took another step forward, his boots echoing against the damp wood. You saw what I wanted you to see. I stumbled back. You're lying. He laughed softly, the sound hollow and chilling. You always were naive, Leah. You thought one little shove would erase me. No, I wanted you to live with it, to wonder every day if I was still out there. My throat tightened. You faked your death. I had to, he said, his tone turning almost casual. After the accident, after the police started asking questions, it was easier to disappear. Let them think I was gone. It gave me time to watch, to plan. He was circling me now, his movements smooth, predatory. I tried to keep distance between us, but the edge of the pier was only a few feet behind me. The waves crashed violently below. You've been watching me, I said, my voice trembling. For years, he replied, almost proudly. Every town you moved to, every name you tried on, I knew where you were. But you were doing such a good job punishing yourself, I didn't have to intervene, until you started pretending to be someone new, until you smiled for that camera. The photograph, the magazine, the notes, it was all him. You sent the messages, I said slowly. You left the package. The notes? He nodded. And the pictures, of course. You should have seen your face that day at the gallery. You looked happy, free. I couldn't have that. My hands clenched into fists, anger rising through the fear. Why? What do you want from me, Simon? You got away. You're alive. He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. I want everyone to know what you are. A liar, a coward, a killer. He said that last word with such venom that it cut straight through me. I took a shaky breath, forcing my words out. You're wrong. What happened that night was an accident. You were drunk. You attacked me. Don't twist it, he snapped. You're the one who pushed me. And you're the one who's been stalking me. I shot back, my voice breaking. You think this makes you some kind of victim? His face changed then. No more amusement, no more calm. Just rage. Pure, controlled rage. He lunged forward, grabbing my wrist, just like he had that night years ago. His grip was iron, his nails biting into my... You ruined me, he hissed. My career, my marriage, my life? You think you can just hide in some little beach tent and pretend it never happened? I struggled, trying to twist free, but his strength overpowered mine. Let me go. No, he said, leaning closer, his breath hot against my ear. Not this time. He yanked me toward him, and for a second I thought he was going to throw me into the water. My foot slipped on the slick wood, but before I could fall, I heard something. Footsteps. Quick, deliberate. Leah! Amber's voice. Simon turned sharply, his eyes narrowing as my sister emerged from the fog, holding a flashlight in one hand, her phone in the other. Get away from her, she shouted. Simon smirked. Ah, the sister. How touching. Come to save your poor, broken sibling? Amber didn't hesitate. The police are on their way. He laughed, shaking his head. They won't believe you. They never do. Leah's just a liar, remember? Amber stepped closer, trembling but resolute. You're sick. Simon ignored her, turning back to me. You could have told them the truth, Leah. You could have saved yourself. But you ran. You ran because deep down, you knew what you did. I didn't mean to hurt you, I said, my voice cracking. He leaned in closer, his smile venomous. That's what they all say. The wind howled across the pier, whipping my hair around my face. The boards groaned under our weight. I tried to pull away again, but his grip only tightened. Amber moved behind him, her flashlight trembling in her hand. Let her go, she said again, her voice steady but strained. Simon turned slightly, his attention flickering toward her, and that was the opening I needed. I twisted my wrist sharply, breaking free from his hold. He lunged to grab me again, but before he could, Amber swung the flashlight with both hands. It connected with the side of his head with a sickening crack. Simon staggered backward, his hand flying to the wound. Blood streaked down his temple. He stumbled, dazed but still upright. Amber, run! I yelled. We bolted toward the car parked at the end of the pier. Behind us, Simon's voice echoed through the fog, furious, wounded, unhinged. You can't hide forever, Leah. I didn't look back. We jumped into the car, my hands shaking as I fumbled with the keys. The engine sputtered to life, and I slammed my foot on the gas. The pier disappeared behind us as we sped down the deserted coastal road. Neither of us spoke for a long time. The only sound was my ragged breathing and the rain pelting against the windshield. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel. Finally, Amber broke the silence. Was that really him? I nodded slowly, tears blurring my vision. He's alive. He's been alive all this time. She exhaled, gripping the seatbelt. We should have stayed. We should have made sure I cut her off. He's not dead. She looked at me, startled. How do you know? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Somehow I could feel it, the same way I'd felt his presence before he called me, before I saw him through the fog. He wasn't gone. When we finally reached the edge of town, I pulled over. My hands were still shaking too hard to drive. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving behind pure exhaustion and terror. Amber put a hand on my shoulder. Leah, what do we do now? I stared out at the dark horizon, the faint outline of the ocean barely visible in the distance. He's going to tell everyone, I said softly. Everything I've tried to hide. He'll make sure the whole world knows who I am. Amber's voice was small. Then what? I looked at her, my decision already forming like a storm in my chest. Then I'll tell them myself. She frowned. What do you mean? If I don't speak first, he'll control the story again, I said. He's always controlled it. The only way to stop him is to expose everything, to tell the truth before he does. Amber's eyes widened. Leah, if you go public... I know, I interrupted, but I can't keep running from him, from any of it. It ends with me telling the world what really happened. Amber stared at me, tears brimming in her eyes. And if he comes after you again? I swallowed hard, gripping the steering wheel. Then at least this time, everyone will know who he really is. I decided to do the one thing I'd sworn I'd never do again, step into the light and tell my story before Simon could destroy it himself. Sometimes the only way to survive is to stop hiding. For days after that night at the pier, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Simon's face, his cold smile, his eyes gleaming through the fog. I could still hear his voice. "You stole my life, Leah." It played in my head like a broken record, but beneath the fear, something else began to rise. A quiet, steady resolve. I was done being afraid, done letting him control my story. Amber wanted me to leave town again, to start over somewhere new, but the thought of running made me sick. I'd spent 3 years hiding from my past, pretending to be someone else, and look where it had led me. Right back to the beginning. Maybe the only way forward was to finally stop lying. So one morning, as the rain tapped against the window, I set up my phone on the kitchen counter and pressed record. My hands shook at first and my voice cracked, but I kept going. "My name," I began, "is Leah Kinsley, and this is the truth." The words poured out like poison I'd been holding in for years. I talked about everything: the affair, the manipulation, the fear. I described how Simon had changed from the charming teacher everyone loved to someone who controlled every aspect of my life. I told them about that night, about how he came to my house, drunk and furious, how I pushed him in self-defense, how I thought I'd killed him. I didn't edit the video. I didn't script it or polish my words. I just spoke until there was nothing left to say. Then I uploaded it anonymously under the title, "The Truth About Simon Reeves." For hours afterward, I sat in silence, staring at the screen. I expected backlash, hatred, disbelief, people calling me a liar or worse. But when I finally checked the comments, what I found wasn't cruelty. It was empathy. Dozens of people wrote that they believed me. Some even shared their own stories, relationships that started with charm and ended in control, fear, and guilt. Others thanked me for speaking out, saying it gave them courage to confront their own abusers. I cried reading those messages, not out of relief exactly, but out of something I hadn't felt in years: connection. For the first time since that night, I wasn't completely alone. A few days later, the video went viral. News outlets picked it up, calling it the anonymous confession that broke the silence. Eventually, someone connected the details in my story to old local reports about Simon's disappearance. I knew what that meant. The anonymity wouldn't last. So I did something I never thought I'd do again. I came forward. Amber went with me to the police station. My legs felt weak as I walked through those glass doors, my old name echoing in my head like a ghost. The officer on duty recognized it immediately. How could he not? Leah Kinsley had been the center of scandal and speculation years ago. I told them everything, about Simon, about my escape, about the threats and the photographs. I showed them the notes, the messages, even the footage from the pier that Amber had secretly recorded on her phone that night. They listened. For once, someone actually listened. The investigation into Simon's death reopened, and it didn't take long before things started unraveling. They found evidence of his stalking, security footage, fake email accounts, credit card transactions that traced his movements across states. He had built an entire shadow life under a new name, working odd jobs, drifting from town to town. And then, 1 week later, news broke that he'd been arrested in a neighboring coastal town after confronting another woman outside her workplace. He hadn't just been watching me, he'd done it before, and likely would have done it again. When the police called to tell me they had him in custody, I didn't feel triumph. I didn't even feel anger. I just felt empty, like a storm had passed, leaving nothing but silence in its wake. But that silence wasn't painful. It was peaceful. With Simon's arrest came questions. Reporters wanted interviews, the media wanted statements, and the internet wanted to know who the woman behind "The Truth About Simon Reeves" really was. I decided not to hide anymore. I revealed my real name, Leah Kinsley. The fallout was overwhelming at first. People from my old town reached out. Some apologized for the way they'd treated me. Others stayed silent. But I didn't care. For once, I wasn't defined by shame. The legal consequences came next. I was charged with identity fraud for the false documents I'd used to become Isla Morgan. I didn't fight it. I pleaded guilty, explained why I'd done it, and cooperated fully with the investigation. My attorney, someone recommended by a victims advocacy group, helped me navigate the process. Because I'd helped the police capture Simon, the court showed leniency. I served community service, paid fines, and underwent mandatory counseling. It wasn't punishment, it was closure. Amber stood by me through it all. She even spoke on my behalf during the hearing, her voice trembling but strong. "My sister made mistakes," she said, "but she's not a criminal. She's a survivor." Those words stuck with me. I'd never thought of myself that way before. I'd always seen myself as the villain in my own story. But maybe, just maybe, there was room to be both. The woman who'd made terrible choices and the one who finally faced them. Months passed. The media frenzy faded. Life somehow began to rebuild itself around the truth. I moved into a new apartment, this time under my real name. The landlord asked for references, and for once, I didn't have to lie. I got a part-time job teaching art therapy workshops for trauma survivors, something that made me feel like my pain had a purpose. Every day, I felt a little lighter, a little more whole. Freedom didn't come from running, I realized. It came from owning the truth, no matter how ugly it was. And yet, even as I began to heal, there were moments when I still felt the past breathing down my neck. In crowded places, I sometimes thought I saw Simon's face. In quiet rooms, I still heard his voice. But those moments passed quickly now, like shadows fading at dawn. One evening, I sat at my kitchen table, the same spot where I'd filmed my confession, and watched the sun set over the ocean. Amber called to check in, her voice warm and steady. For the first time in years, we talked about the future instead of the past. When the call ended, I noticed an envelope on the floor just inside the front door. No return address, no stamp, just my name, Leah, written in neat, familiar handwriting. My pulse quickened. I picked it up slowly, my fingers trembling. Inside was a single photograph. At first I thought it was one of the old ones, another relic of Simon's torment. But as I turned it toward the light, I froze. It was new, taken from outside, my window again. Only this time, there was something different. In the reflection of the glass, I wasn't alone. Someone was standing behind me. The nightmare I thought I'd escaped wasn't over. Someone else was watching now, and they wanted me to know it. It wasn't over. Not yet. When I first saw the envelope on my doorstep, my stomach clenched. It was late evening, the sky bruised with the colors of a fading sunset, and the wind coming off the ocean carried that faint metallic chill that always makes me uneasy. I hesitated before picking it up, my pulse quickening. It looked almost identical to the one Simon had used. The same unmarked white paper, the same neat handwriting spelling out my name. Leah. For a few long moments, I stood there, staring at it, afraid to open it. After everything that had happened, part of me wanted to throw it straight into the fire. But another part, the part that refused to keep living in fear, needed to know what was inside. I tore the seal slowly. My fingers trembled as I pulled out the contents, a single photograph. For an instant, my breath caught. It was the photograph. The one Evan had taken at the gallery. The candid shot of me laughing beneath the sunlight. The same image that had exposed my identity and sent my entire life spiraling. The same one I had ripped from its frame in terror. But this time it was different. Across the bottom corner, in elegant handwriting, were the words, "For Leah, the woman who finally found herself." It was signed simply, Evan Rhodes. My heart ached in a way I didn't expect. I sank into the nearest chair, holding the photo carefully between my hands. There was no threat this time, no accusation, no message meant to terrify, just acknowledgement. I hadn't seen Evan since before everything unraveled. I'd assumed he was part of Simon's twisted plan, another puppet in a scheme to torment me. But now, seeing his signature, I realized I'd been wrong. He must have known, or maybe found out later, what his picture had set in motion. And maybe, in his own quiet way, this was his attempt to give it back to me, not as a weapon, but as closure. I looked at my face in that image, the way I was laughing, freely, unknowingly. That woman didn't know the storm that was coming, but she looked alive in a way I hadn't been in years. I realized then that I wanted her back, not Leah the fugitive, not Isla the ghost, just the woman who could laugh without fear. For the first time since everything began, I smiled at the photograph. I found an old frame at the back of my closet, the same one that had once held the image before Simon stole it, and placed the photo inside. Then, without hesitation, I hung it on the wall above my couch. The same spot where it had once felt like a curse now felt like a beginning. When Amber came by the next day, she noticed it immediately. "You framed it again," she said softly, studying the image. "I did," I replied. "It's different now." Amber smiled faintly. "It's strange. For years that picture felt like the start of everything going wrong. But now, I think it's the reason everything's finally right." She was right. The photograph had been the spark that burned away all my lies. Painful as it was, it forced me to stop hiding, to confront every piece of who I used to be. It had cost me everything, but it had also given me back something I didn't realize I'd lost: myself. Amber visits often now. We cook dinner together, talk about Mom, about the years we lost and the time we still have. Our conversations are sometimes awkward, often emotional, but they're real. And real feels like enough. Mom passed quietly a few months after everything came out. She never fully recovered, but Amber told me she watched my confession video before she died, that she said, "I always knew Leah had a good heart." Those words will stay with me forever. I still live in the same coastal town. I thought I'd leave after Simon's arrest, but something inside me refused to go. Maybe because this place is where I stopped running. Maybe because the ocean feels like the only witness that truly understands. I started volunteering at a women's shelter downtown, helping with art therapy sessions. At first, it was just something to fill the silence, but as I listened to the women's stories, stories of manipulation, control, and rebuilding, I realized how many lives looked like mine once had, how many Leahs and Islas existed, hiding behind different names, different scars. It wasn't long before I began speaking at small local events. My hands would shake at the microphone, but the words came anyway. I talked about identity, not the kind that lives on a driver's license, but the kind that survives inside you when everything else is stripped away. Eventually, people started asking me to speak at larger conferences, schools, community groups, even domestic violence organizations. It felt surreal, standing in front of strangers, telling them the story I once would have done anything to erase. But every time someone came up afterward and said, "That was my story too," I understood why I had to keep telling it. That photograph, once my downfall, became the emblem of my rebirth. I still keep the note that came with it tucked into the frame's back. For Leah, the woman who finally found herself. Some nights, I take it down, sit by the window, and reread those words. Not because I need reassurance, but because it reminds me how far I've come. One evening, I walked along the beach just before sunset. The air smelled of salt and jasmine, the sky streaked with gold and violet. The tide was low, and the water pulled softly at the shore like it was exhaling. I watched the waves curl and break, and for the first time in a long time, I felt peace instead of fear. I thought about everything that had happened, the lies, the guilt, the fear that used to eat at me like rust. I thought about Simon, too, about how some ghosts don't die until you stop feeding them your fear. He was gone now, locked away in a place where he couldn't touch me anymore. But even if he hadn't been, I knew something he never did. Survival isn't about disappearing. It's about becoming. I whispered the truth aloud to the wind, a truth I'd learned the hardest way possible. You can change your name, your face, even your world, but not your soul. And sometimes, that's the one thing worth saving. As the sun dipped beneath the horizon, I turned back toward home. The sky deepened to indigo, and lights flickered on in the windows along the coast. When I reached my apartment, the framed photograph greeted me from the wall. The woman in it was both a stranger and someone I knew intimately. Her laughter, her unguarded joy, it no longer haunted me. It reminded me that despite everything, I was still capable of that kind of light. The camera of life, if you could call it that, would have panned slowly across the living room, coming to rest on that single photograph. The light from the setting sun caught the glass just right, reflecting two faces at once, the Leah who once hid from herself and the woman who had finally stopped running. And for the first time, both of them were smiling. The camera lingers on the framed photograph, the light glinting across its surface, revealing in its reflection not the ghosts of who I was, but the truth of who I've become. Some secrets don't stay buried. They just wait for the right moment to surface. I'd spent years hiding behind new names and new faces, thinking that would keep me safe. But the truth isn't something you can outrun. It follows, it lingers, it demands to be faced. In the end, it wasn't the photograph that exposed me. It was the courage to finally see myself for who I really am. And that, I've learned, is the only kind of freedom worth having. If my story taught you anything, it's that no matter how far you run, the truth always finds a way to reach you. Some people spend their lives hiding from it. Others finally face it and begin to live again. If you were in my place, would you keep the past buried or risk everything to reveal it? Tell me what your heart says in the comments below.